What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for your Overwatch, and today we're going to be doing a complete breakdown of all of the top rush meta heroes and the principles that they should be played under. A lot of these rules seem to be setting up the arc of where they're trying to take Overwatch to, so these skills should translate for quite some time. Overwatch at different times was too overly shooter or too overly MOBA, but the direction they've been balancing the game indicates to me that they're going to have severe aspects of both. We'll talk about all of these things, but let's start off with the Reinhardt position, who's the tip of the spear of rush. Remember how he's been rebalanced: less shield, moves faster when shielding, more armor health, and more damage. This means he can face tank more, and the devs have made him into more of a fighter rather than a protector. And it's shifting this mentality that I think is really going to take your Reinhardt gameplay to the next level. So as an example, we're running a full rush comp here on Well. The enemy is running what I would call a deathmatch comp with Hog and Ball that need to flank around. Tracer's looking for an angle, and they have a vulnerable backline. Far too often when I see players go up against a matchup like this, they just stand on their side, hoping not to die. But in rush meta, your goal should always be to look for a vulnerable target and run at it relentlessly. Anytime you can find a free elimination, the principles of rush means you should go cash it in as soon as possible. Vulnerable targets out of position or the biggest threat to your team. The targeting changes depending on the situation, but you can see here we play ring around the rosy to try to use our speed amp to close the distance on the enemy and use our hammer and fire strike damage to confirm kills quickly rather than waiting around for something to happen. Rein's shield is still going to be really important for blocking key cooldowns, lines of sight, and especially ultimates, but for the most part, the team that takes the initiative to find the vulnerable targets quicker is going to resolve the team fight faster. And when doing this, I think it's important to remember that the DPS characters should be most of your focus because they have so much of the swing potential in fights in their hands with how much they've been buffed. With defenses not high enough to just hide behind them, pressuring the enemy's offenses is what's going to keep your team alive. In this Streets phase of Dorado shows a good example of this, but also a great example of an instance where the objective matters the least. Streets phase of Payload maps is where you can allow the cart to progress more than any other because the checkpoint to flip the spawns is so far. So that means you have even more flexibility on where you take these aggressive fights. As the enemy is attempting to take the high ground above us, we're looking for opportunities to intercept them on the way. As defenders, we can wait for them to come get us, or we can go rush at the enemy's respawners and take a 2v2 that we can win because our characters are statted appropriately to win in close range. Even up against the almighty Baptiste lamp, just as Lucio and Reinhardt, we can run over the enemy Ashe and Baptiste, which, let's face it, is their super powered backline. Will we lose some cart control in the process? Yes, but those two characters are the ones that have the biggest potential to overtake the fight and resolve it. And that's how you want to think about your targeting and how aggressive you need to play. If you play too defensive in the DPS exchange, the enemy's DPS likely are going to feel less pressured than yours. So whether you're playing as Lucio, Reinhardt, Zarya, Reaper, May, whomever, rush is all about getting your close range advantage onto the enemy as soon as you see the opening. We'll see some examples of that on this Oasis game, as well as when to adapt based on what the enemy's picking. As these team fights break out on Guardians, I'm circling around the map trying to isolate something that is low on defenses or mobility. Zarya can be good for this, as a little bit out of position means that your team can focus fire her possibly, but even more important than that is the enemy soldier, who's going to be adding the biggest amount of firepower threat onto our team. So denying and dueling him is going to make the rest of the team's job much easier. And even though after this pick, the enemy begin to start trading, it's not enough. Even losing our healer matters less than them losing their first DPS, as it's the aggressive ability to convert eliminations that's become the standard mode of Overwatch now, and how I expect it to function moving forward, generally speaking, based on how they indicated they are setting up Overwatch 2. Now, round 2, the enemy turtled a little bit better, defending against our aggression on a more wide open map. So on round 3, what we're going to do is hold our map position more carefully and heavily leverage a Mei advantage. Normally in Overwatch, to be honest, I think players really neglect the modifying factor that DPS have on your team comps, but since they've been repeatedly buffed, those differences matter a lot. If you have Mei, you'll have a tank advantage. If they have double hit scan, they'll more easily be able to punish you from spreading out or taking different positions, but they'll be worse at breaking shields, which like a more spammy character would be. This is the interesting thing about how hit scans work now after they've been reined in repeatedly, but still kind of like the best DPS at the same time. A well-executed rush shouldn't lose to double hit scan as long as you play around your walls and shields better. Hit scans will win if you start taking poke battles with a range disadvantage, taking unnecessary fights, but Mei begins to look like a must pick when you start to engage more carefully, especially with how much she does in influencing the whole team fight. A lot of basics of Mei play is going to go a really long way for you if you know what she actually can add. A lot of players know wall off the Rhine makes him an easy focus fire target, but it's actually not that simple. Because there's things like D.Va or Lamp in the game, it is possible for enemy defenses to get over the wall with a Baptiste jump to save the Rhine with a Lamp or heals or whatever, so it's not as much of a free kill as it was in previous Mei metas. But with shielding and defenses kind of low, you can do cute things like keep a wall just in front of the enemy's powerful backlines and interrupt them to almost be like a Winston bubble of a line of sight breaker, meaning that you will just have more shields than the enemy if you're denying their poke just with a Mei wall line of sighting. This is what our Mei player does on this round of Oasis, where the enemy is playing a off-meta DPS in Genji, and we're playing Mei McCree. Now, although we do get a good wall on the Rhine, we're not confident we can eliminate him, so we just keep poking and are gradually winning the shield trade. The enemy's Rhine puts his team in no positional advantage, and the rest of us either have high ground or cover around the point, meaning that our concave of poke is much stronger, and we don't necessarily have to fully rush because we're being put under no threat. Our Rhine has the benefit of using cover when he needs, and their Rhine is forced to keep shield up just to survive. Okay, so at this point, I've told you two different things a little bit. Relentlessly feed against the enemy's carries, or hold your position. When should you do which? Well, here's an example of us kind of adapting this. This time we're running Mei and Reaper, which is mostly how you want to adjust based on where your damage is coming from. We're holding amp until we're ready to burst forward. I don't use it to heal or speed us out of spawn. It is the gas pedal to our rush to be able to close the distance. We see them, we think they're in close enough range for us to close it. We amp in and attempt to hit a wall. The wall doesn't really find purchase. We're taking poke, so then we just back off, gaining the space we have, waiting for our cooldowns to come back. The team fight gets a little crazy by this point, but the principles remain the same. Don't let the carry wander around. The kills they're cashing in matter less than the McCree we isolated up top. So even though we're sort of losing this fight, we eventually regain our ground, regroup with our respawns, and then boom, the rush comes back in again, amp on the Rhine, closes the distance, free swing damage, and before you know it, we flip the fight, we've got a Rhine in front, able to run them over again. It's this give and take of reading if your rush can be successful that's going to be the difference maker for you. And the way you know is whether or not the characters Reinhardt or Lucio can easily run at the target and beat it without getting punished. And really, with Reinhardt's shield, you have the defenses to be able to do that against most things, though you will want to outplay ultimates when the enemy has them. Some really easy rush targets for you is Sigma, Ana, Ashe, McCree. If they're in rush range, you should go cash it in. And if not, you should look to set up your own DPS until you can jockey for position well enough in order to create an elimination opportunity. Now, the reason why I'm saying the DPS position is so important, because Blizzard has kind of repeatedly given these guys nukes on cooldown on a few different characters at least. McCree being the most important one for me because his skill ceiling is quite high with his primary fire, but with his health and stun, as well as repeatedly buffed ultimate, he has interactions with the rush gameplay at all points. Flashbang has a massive area of effect and how you want to focus a lot of your gameplay, because McCree is a character both can play with his tanks quite a bit, and you can feel free to just use Fan the Hammer like half of the game on the tanks to pressure them out. It's that overtuned. But then on top of that, deny a lot of these rush plays onto his team due to the flashbang. On this defense of Hollywood, we had to execute this play to perfection, needing to hold Streets phase for 5 full minutes. We can't afford to just let the enemy build up ults and throw them at us. We we have to control the tempo and cycle our ultimates appropriately. Starting off with this very first grav, where you see us launch to find the gap behind the enemy Rein shield. Zarya players, I see this all the time. Grav squishy characters. They're the ones that matter. Because once Rein doesn't have a support system, as scary as he is as a pick, you can just dance around him. Far too often do I see players grab the tanks and the Rein shield can protect the lamp. Try to place your Graviton Surge out in the open to force the lamp there so your team can easily destroy it. Here, the enemy Reinhardt is trying to go take the high ground from us, but I use that window of opportunity to target his backline and make him make an impossible decision. He needs to jump in the grav to defend his team, but then he's going to lose his ability to go swing on the high ground. By not waiting for him to get there, my powerful squishies stay alive and his fall. And that's how you should try to think about structuring your engagements. How can you set up the abilities you have to confirm a limbs? With Shatter and the enemy having a D.Va, our Rein Zarya should be able to bully the front line a bit more. So we play the low ground this fight to attack the choke with Shatter. Cash in that free win. The enemy plays their attack a bit confused and disorganized. Some of them want to just play the cart the whole time. Others know the high ground's important, but our team's on the same page. We'll fight the cart when we have the resources to do so, but we're ready to bail the heck out of there when the enemy start tossing their ults. That's how the resource exchange works. The enemy that's ulting should win the cart fight, but because the payload has so far to go, we don't have to worry about it and can just go utilize high ground again. Because I, as Zarya, bail on this fight, knowing that they're using too many ults for me to survive and hold and go up to the high ground, I'm able to bubble my DPS in the nick of time to save him, beam down the enemy's DPS, and now from the overhead view, I hope this is like blatantly obvious. So much so that you never neglect the high ground in a game ever again. The enemy has cart control, but it's going to take them 10 years to push it all the way to the checkpoint. We have a crossfire on the high ground, which means we will eventually poke them down and win. Their Rein can't swing on anything, their D.Va's too far, Bap has no target. With just a slight reposition, we easily turn this fight, and the attack might be scratching their heads. How did we end up losing that? We used all those ults and we didn't get anything out of it. Well, the reason is because they went to the cart with their ults. If they launch the D.Va bomb in the window all at the cart and we say, bye, we'll take high ground, thank you very much, they should always lose, no matter how much time they have in the time bank. 2 minutes on the clock, they're starting to figure out what we're doing. They play a little bit more defensive against our aggressive fight at the choke using our amp matrix, largely hide away from it, don't get hit by the fire strike, which is a major combo you should try to count down with your teammates, ideally placing the window right in front of the Reinhardt as he's in the animation so it just comes out instantly and snipes something. But that's fine, we burn some clock, they're losing time, we still have control of the map, which is what matters. And here again with Grav, to make sure we cash in this fight, I see the Rein shield peek a little bit too far in front and I abuse the really big 6-meter radius of the Grav to snag the backline away from the Rein shield to guarantee that we'll get this fight. We over ult a bit, which makes us nervous, but control of the map is what's going to allow you to set up your elimination conditions. And all we have to do is trade some players to thin out the attack, and we'll be able to reestablish a defense. We don't even necessarily have to win this fight. And with that being the case, our Reinhardt decides to go deep. Again, with the same principle, interrupting their progress forward and gets a money pin. The enemy's Rein has an opportunity to finally find the backline swings he's been looking for, but gets outplayed by our Baptiste, which, don't worry, we will get into explaining some Baptiste fundamentals as he's incredibly important to the meta as well. But one last example from this clip, we'll just see a very crucial targeting error by the enemy D.Va, who gets baited into chasing me as Zarya, which granted, when a Zarya burns bubble, she can be a rush target, but my positioning was such that I was able to get away. Maybe assumed I had Grav and wanted to pressure that out, wasn't even close. But that mistake meant that this more important damage angle was wide open yet again, and Baptiste is left defenseless. This is essentially what I mean when I say DPS are what you need to focus on, because between stun, fan the hammer, or hitscan damage, Junkrat, Doomfist, whatever is bothering you, there's easy kills to be had that you just can't let up. So in a moment, if your targeting is wrong, the threats of the enemy can go unmarked and the team fight can quickly resolve out of your favor. And that's how you get a 5-minute hold on Streets phase, employing those crucial tactics. Next up, let's explain the importance of Baptiste right now, a character that's pretty likely to get reworked, changed, nerfed, something or other, because the plays he can make are just over the top, in my opinion, in terms of how easy they are to reproduce. Here's a situation where we lose a pick, but because it was a support, not a carry, we were still able to keep our carries alive, playing around one of the more broken abilities in the game, Immortality Field. With 2 range characters, I'm not overly eager to bubble early because we're not going to win the tank battle too quickly without a Mei or something. So I'm trying to bubble for space. We work up to our charge, but have no resources left, but are winning the shield trade. We have slightly more shield than the enemy because we've managed it a bit better. So even though we lose our Lucio here, because we have a lamp and the enemy doesn't, this huge dynamite onto our backline doesn't even matter. The well-timed lamp and AoE heals of Baptiste is going to keep up our 2 main damage threats, McCree's Fan the Hammer and Zarya's Beam, which the combination of the 2 are going to easily melt the enemy Reinhardt. Swing this fight from one where they should have been able to just run us over to one where we can hold our ground, keeping our carries alive to inflict huge amounts of damage to secure more important eliminations than the ones that they got. And the main reason for this, to be honest, is the enemy is on Ana and not playing her particularly well. I've made multiple guides about this and have been working towards the Ana Mastery Guide as well to try to finalize this, but I'll link you now to the 2 Playmaking Ana guides I've made recently to try to help you out. But compare the Baptiste lamp that you stand in and cannot die in versus this Ana's ability usage that, okay, one of the nades confirmed the kill on the Lucio, but other than that, tossing nades at full HP targets is not acceptable from your Ana. This means the Rein had less health than our Rein, despite being down a healer, and our comp is just easier to play around. We should be in a we're screwed situation, hiding and running for our lives, but because we gained Zarya charge and kept our McCree alive on cover on a lamp, we're going to be able to deal more frontline damage than they can. It is on this Ana to find an aggressive nade onto the backline in order to carry this fight. So because of this, not only should have the Ana been ready to go with her Reinhardt at this time to try to keep him up, even better yet, she can think to play like a DPS and go up to this Ashe position, because winning the tank battle isn't really what Ana does and hasn't done for a long time. She's a playmaker, a DPS who can also heal. So walking up top with the Ashe might have kept her alive, but also added a punching power to that same TNT angle. It's really hard to win the Rein trade with an Ana because she heals less and can't heal and pressure at the same time, doesn't have lamp, which is easy. On just so many counts, the tank battle is going to be harder to win with Ana. Not to mention she's an easy rush target anyway. Between Rein, Zarya, and D.Va, who's also good, any of those tanks should be able to block what she does, while the Bap has his max value not getting blocked really, and just has a higher amount of uptime. Again, this is something that might change, but for now at least, Baptiste just functions as a support as players tend to want to play the role. I do think Ana has severe carry potential because the defenses of the game are so low, but you do have to play her like a maniac, looking for the plays constantly, and throwing an early nade before something is out of position or that your team can capitalize on is akin to like throwing an ult away. It's just, you're not a character at that point if you throw a nade at a full HP Zarya who can bubble and cleanse it. It's the same thing as playing Widowmaker and shooting shields or something. You're not really contributing, especially when you consider the fact that, as we said earlier, the ult cycling of these picks is so important, and Baptiste has a lot more power in the ult fight as well. Nano can do some ridiculous things, but Lamp and Window interact with the ult fight easier and allows your team to jump into that position and more flexibly make the play. Nano goes to one target who's kind of all in on getting that to work. Whereas because Baptiste's ultimates, and yeah, I use plural, I think Lamp's an ultimate, are shared, you can flexibly change who's getting the benefit from it. And it's not all on one player in order to make the play. And I should have said this earlier, but pay attention now. The number one Baptiste tip I have for you is do not conserve Lamp too long. It is not that precious of a cooldown. It's actually ridiculously short for how strong it is. So it's much better to toss it out at the first sign of trouble rather than waiting to set it up in the perfect possible way. Remembering that even when it's out in the open, your main tank should be able to shield and protect it and stabilize around it. Or a DPS can get another instance of an aggressive insta-kill cooldown out by playing inside it. There's a lot of things you can do. So when the play is coming in, remembering it's rush meta, big, fast, high-impact plays are coming, throwing that lamp early is going to save your team and swing those plays into your favor if they don't account for it appropriately. Some other general Baptiste tips for you that I notice is that players often get confused how to handle their team splitting up ever, try to remind your team who you're healing to clump up next to them so they can get AoE healed too. When possible, make plans for your immortality fields, setting up in cheeky positions that allows for the team to hold a position more greedily than they normally would. Like here on the top of the stairwell, I tell my McCree to stand right here, I'll lamp him, and then he can hold the high noon longer than he should be able to, converting that into a kill. And the biggest mistake I see players make around a Baptiste is tanks playing like it's other metas where Ana might be the best or something, and they're expecting to get burst healed from low health up to full. Bap doesn't do that, so instead try to get your tanks to play on the cadence of use their armor health, then shield for a prolonged period of time, then go again with the rush or playing around the lamp. They can't just keep going in and brawling repeatedly expecting to get Ana-nated and bursted up to full. That's not what Baptiste does. Instead, he looks most OP when he's able to heal multiple of his team while also applying DPS pressure himself. So it becomes a bit more of a team effort rather than your main tank being able to get full out pocketed like other healer abilities can do. Okay, we've covered a lot of characters, but I want to sneak in one more, and that's D.Va. Reason being that although Zarya has some incredible power still, even after the nerf, especially on maps like Gibraltar, where getting to the high ground is inefficient and easy to outplay, D.Va can do a much better job influencing the DPS battle, even though your team will be more vulnerable to a full-out rush comp. A D.Va pick makes your frontline less brawly, but more adaptive to off angles for picks like Pharah, Echo, or Hitscans on the high ground, etc. One of the best counters to Zarya is just the Hitscan getting an angle, refusing to spam her bubbles, denying her charge, and then headshotting her afterwards. D.Va has the speed to just bypass those lines of sight and positionally outplay the opponent. Gibraltar C can tend to give attacking teams lots of trouble when this enemy high ground gets exploited and no one really knows how to go up there. A combination of the surprise boosters from the opposite side, booping them down, and my Reinhardt being on the other side to receive them, creates a rush play that Zarya just can't execute. I think it's useful to think of D.Va in this meta as a way to extend Reinhardt's capabilities, or Winston, so they don't get poked out or bursted in transition to those spots. Bubble sustains you more in the brawl, but D.Va gives you that map control when you need it. And there are a ton of squishy characters that she just can straight out bully if you get her kill combos down. Remembering to use micro missiles as you're closing the distance on the enemy in close range and try to move quickly in and out of the fight, maximizing the uptime of your 300 armor health. With tanks being a bit more tanky with the armor buffs, you have more room to play for face tanking and getting healed without being punishable. So much so that, surprisingly, a lot of characters that would have farmed D.Va in the past struggle a bit more than you might expect. Zarya without high charge, as an example, once she uses her bubble, it's pretty easy for D.Va, to be honest. Roadhog as well will struggle to solo kill a D.Va, can with help, but even hooking her in with 300 armor, it's just way too much. And when DPSs badly need the vertical game or high ground in order to set up their angles, D.Va rushing at them can often just be too much to handle. D.Va, as well as many of the characters we covered today, deserves their own guide separately, but I wanted to make this one that gave a good overview of everything going on in the meta that are most important so that you can adapt your playstyle, at least for this patch cycle until they nerf Baptiste, which will send everything else in another direction, I think, potentially. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Hopefully that gives you a nice base point to gain some SR in this season and maybe for the next couple. And if you found it useful, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.